Welcome back everyone. Hi, if you're new, I'm Tori, and today I'm going to share with you guys some books that I read this year that turned out to be really unexpected surprises. These are books that surprised me in a lot of different ways. I have books on here that I was a little hesitant about going into. I was excited to read them, but just didn't know exactly how I was going to get on with it, where I was going to land on that enjoyment spectrum, and the book just really went above and beyond my expectations. I have a book on here that I actually read earlier in the year and I did enjoy it at the time, but I was kind of just lukewarm about it. But now the book has sat with me all these months now and has just really grown on me, and now I actually really love the book. Then I have books on here that I went into fully expecting to enjoy, but they just ended up blowing me away. On the opposite side, I have two books I want to talk about that surprised me in a more negative way. Books that I still enjoyed, but they definitely weren't what I was expecting them to be. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know down in the comments some of your surprising reads from 2023, and let's get into it. Book making this list is a surprise in a more negative way. I'm going to do this one first, and then I'm going to have the other book in this category at the end of the video, kind of bookend them. So that is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I have talked about this a couple of times over the course of the year. This was one of my most anticipated sequels for 2023, just one of my most anticipated reads in general, sequel or not. I've read Ninth House, I've listened to the audiobook multiple times. It is just a story I cannot get enough of. I really love Alex and how dark it is. It's a fantastic read. So Ninth House I thought was incredible, and we had to wait a really long time to get this sequel. Unfortunately for me, I did enjoy this, but it just wasn't the sequel that I was really hoping that it would be. I always say this about Hellbent when I talk about it, is that I did enjoy this book. I really did. It's just, I really thought I was going to love this and be raving about it all year, and I just thought it was just going to be just a perfect follow-up to Ninth House, and it didn't really deliver that for me, unfortunately. I think in this one, Alex felt a little bit more muted to me. She felt like kind of a background character in her own book at times, but on the flip side of that, it's because the side characters were getting their time to shine in this book more so than they did in Ninth House, which I did appreciate because I love characters like Dawes and Turner. So it was a little bit of a trade-off, but I did think Alex was going to be a little bit of a stronger protagonist for me in this sequel, and unfortunately she just wasn't. I also think a lot of time was just spent on things feeling very repetitive. The end of book one makes the trajectory of this story very clear of what needs to happen. Our characters need to go find someone, and I just think we got a lot of meandering, a lot of repetition going on. Yeah, it didn't work for me like I thought that it would. But again, I did enjoy this. I think Leigh Bardugo is an incredible writer, and there are a lot of other things with this book in terms of like the history that we got with the different societies and just how dark the story was that I really did enjoy, actually more than Ninth House. But just in terms of our characters and keeping that story moving forward with a comfortable pace, I didn't really get on with it that much. I will definitely be reading the third book whenever it comes out, but yeah, it was good, but just not what I was hoping I would get from a Ninth House sequel, given how much I loved the first book. Next is a book I'm just going to give you a little teaser of, because this is going to appear in another upcoming video before the end of the year. But this book fit this surprise of 2023 perfectly, and that is These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, and this is the first book in a brand new sci-fi trilogy. This was incredible. This book was recommended by one of my TikTok mutuals, Caitlin from Realm of My Mind. She has amazing tastes in sci-fi and fantasy. She also has a blog that she runs. I love her wrap-ups, her recommendations. She does like upcoming releases too, and this is a book that immediately caught my eye when she was talking about it, and I gotta say, this might be one of the best recommendations I've ever gotten in my time in any book space. This was incredible. So just a little teaser, because you are going to see this again, but this is a sci-fi story. We have a few different characters that we're following. They are all amazing. One of our characters, she is a thief, she's a hacker, and she comes across information that could really be detrimental to one of the, big families in the galaxy. We have two other characters who are sent out to go find this thief and get that information back. And one of those characters actually belongs to this big family, and everything could just fall apart if this gets out. And then there's another character in here named Six, and you find that they are fueling a lot of the things that are happening in this book. They just kind of hover above the entire story almost, and one of our other characters is just obsessed with Six. It is incredible. It is described as a cat and mouse game across the galaxy. That is exactly what this is. But at the same time, Bethany Jacobs is you know, weaving in some really incredible world building, the different cultures of these planets, just in general how the kingdom actually runs and functions. This blew me away, truly. I finished this book and immediately just felt empty. I was like, what am I possibly gonna do until this sequel comes out? I cannot wait to gush about this in even more detail very, very soon, but I had to include this on the biggest surprise of the year. I could not believe how much I love this book. The next book that turned out to be a big surprise for me this year is The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. This is a book I read earlier in the year. I think it came out in like April, and I read it back when it came out, and I did enjoy it at the time, but I did not feel strongly about this novella at all. It's a sci-fi horror novella. I didn't feel strongly about it. I didn't love it, didn't hate it, but I was like, it's good. I would definitely recommend it like around spooky season. I had a good time, but nothing really, you know, came out of that after I finished it. But now, all these months later, I am still thinking about this book. I love the atmosphere of it. I love how creepy and dark and gory it got. If you love the Alien franchise, if you love the video game Prey, just for the atmosphere and vibes, this book is for you. It was so, now I can say all these months later, it was so good. Now that I look back on that reading experience, I actually had such a fun time reading The Scourge Between Stars. In this, we have our interim captain, and she's having a rough time. She is struggling with a lot of anxiety. She's trying to get this generation ship back to Earth because they were leaving a failed colony, and so now she has all of these people in her care. Food is getting scarce, tensions are running high, and now she's in this leadership position, really trying to do her best to take care of all these people. And all of a sudden, this terror infiltrates the walls of the ship and starts picking off the people one by one, as if things could not be stressful enough. There are moments in this that actually get really gory, and just in terms of the vibes of it, the atmosphere and the tension that Ness Brown creates throughout the book, I just thought it was really well done. I thought this was such a great read. I cannot wait to see what Ness Brown does next. You know, they can do whatever they want, but I really hope the author stays in the sci-fi horror space. I would love to see a full-length novel. Yeah, this was great. Next, I have another fun read. This was more of a recent read for me. I just actually talked about this, but that is The Ginbot of Shanta by Samit Basu. This really took me by surprise. This is one that surprised me because on paper, this is something that I definitely should not have loved. It's described as, I love Aladdin. It's described as a cross between Aladdin and Murderbot. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know this already, but I really, really do not like Murderbot. That's a whole other video. I do not like Murderbot. I don't like the humor in Murderbot. And that's the other thing. Just in general, I don't typically get on with humor in my sci-fi and fantasy books. I always say this. It's one thing like if a character does something funny, says something funny, and I can just, you know, a little chuckle, move on. But when the tone of the book actually reads that way, it's not always a good time for me. There are definitely some books that are the exception, but generally speaking, it doesn't work out for me. But with The Ginbot of Shanta, the tone of it is not, it's not that light, that humorous, but you can definitely see that Murderbot like humor and sarcasm sprinkled across the story. So the fact that the book could do that and like keep me engaged and sucked into the story, that is a big surprise. But just even in general, I really appreciate the way that the story is told. It just feels very creative, even though it is kind of a play on the story of Aladdin. Samit Basu does such an incredible job with the world building of Shanta. This is, you know, a city that's not hitting on too much, to be perfectly honest. You learn more about the politics and the economics and the clans of Shanta. And one of our main characters, Lena, she's the daughter of a failed revolutionary, and her brother, who's featured on the cover, he's like a monkey bot. That's the other thing about Shanta. It's just full of like surveillance and bots and drones and all kind of stuff, which I also thought was really fascinating. What I really love about this book is that it's being told from the perspective of a story bot. And so this character is, you know, following around Lena, following around the brother Bador, and just kind of taking it all in. And because of that, I do think this book could go one of two ways for people, because you're not getting that attachment to these characters, because the story about Moku is just pretty much observing and narrating the things that they see and that's going on. I think my favorite aspect though is the world building of Shanta. I just really loved watching that unfold. And just from this alone, I think Samit Basu is a really talented writer. I cannot wait to read more of their work. Next, I have another book I read earlier this year that also just blew me away. Completely took me by surprise. I did not know I was going to enjoy this book as much as I did. That is The Stars Undying by Emery Robin. This was incredible. I've been saying it all year. This is absolutely incredible. I keep saying this as well. This is definitely not going to be for everybody. This is a retelling of the lives of Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony. And it's set against this really amazing backdrop of these, you know, planet politics and intergalactic politics. It is so good. Our main character, also Gracia, is a twin, and the whole story begins when their father dies, and Gracia's twin basically puts herself in the position of power that their father was in, and she takes control of their planet. And Gracia, she's like, no, this is my planet, this is my birthright, this is my throne. And she allies herself with a commander from another planet who is Julius Caesar, and she is scheming this entire book to get her planet back. I thought this was incredible. It is a slow character and political burner for sure, but I completely ate up those interactions between Gracia and Matthias, the commander. It's good. If it just even sounds interesting, please just give this a chance. And also Gracia, she is an unreliable narrator to the extreme. You can't trust her as far as you can throw her, but I loved it. I highly recommend it, and this is the first book in the Empire Without End series. I cannot wait for book 2. And then the next surprise is a more recent surprise for me. I've actually been reading this book for a while and just recently finished it, but that is none other than Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, and we're just going to ignore the fact that my dog thought this was a little snack. This book was incredible. I had no expectations going into Interview with the Vampire. The only reason I even went back to this book was because of the AMC show. It looked so good, and I saw a little bit of the first episode, and I was like, no, I'm gonna stop this and go back and read the source material. I loved it. If you love something like, you know, Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, I'm pretty sure this was the inspiration. You can definitely see those kind of similarities to it, but it is so good. The prose in this is so beautiful. The character work is so deep and rich. This was such a unique reading experience, and I did not know that I was going to be like pretty much on this high when I finished this book. The actual premise of the story is so simple. This centuries-old vampire, Louis, he is telling the story of his life to this reporter, but the execution of this story is not. It is just filled with trauma and loss and heartbreak, just everything, as Louis is recounting all of the things that have happened to him over the course of his life as a vampire. And also, on top of that, the toxic relationship that he's developed with the vampire Lestat, who turned him into a vampire in the first place. This was fantastic. And this sounds kind of weird to say, but it is so dark and haunting in this incredibly beautiful way almost. But a lot of that though is obviously because of the prose. It's so moody and dramatic and like dark and sensual and almost gothic, and it just flows. Louis is incredibly long-winded, but the way that we just kind of move in and out of scenes, the way that we're just transported through time and all these different places that he's traveled over the course of his vampire life. It is just this incredibly deep self-reflection of his life and that trauma and loss. I love this. And I did have a feeling that I was gonna like this because I do really love Empire of the Vampire, but I had no idea it was gonna be like this. I'm in awe of the story and the way that it's told. I loved it. Then next I have Never Die by Rob J. Hayes, and this is the first book in the Mortal Techniques. This book was the definition of a surprise. I had such a fun time with this. I thought the cast of characters was great. I loved how action-packed everything was. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy story. It does not let up. I actually cannot wait to read the rest of the books in this series. And I want a physical copy of this now because I loved it so much. One of our main characters in this book is this creepy kid, Ian, and he is given this mission from the god of death in order to basically take down the emperor. But he can't do this alone, and he needs to go around and, you know, like round up all of these really legendary heroes and get these heroes into his circle. But in order to do this, the heroes actually need to die first. And once that happens and they become part of this little circle, they just become such a fantastic ensemble of characters. These are legendary heroes that have their own, you know, unique histories and fighting styles. I had so much fun with this book. I highly recommend it. But I think if you're looking for something that is able to balance all of that action with some really just some really interesting character moments, I think you will really enjoy this. So this was such a great read. Definitely took me by surprise this year. And again, I cannot wait to get into book 2. And then last but not least is another book that I did enjoy overall. It's a sequel, but it definitely was not the sequel that I was hoping it would be, especially given that I loved the first book so much, and that is Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. I love Legendborn. It made one of my best books of the year a couple of years ago. I think Legendborn, just even YA fantasy or not, is just an incredible book. I love the way that that legend of the Knights of the Round Table was woven into Bree's story. I love Bree as a main character. I just had such a great time with Legendborn. Bloodmarked, though, was a bit of a letdown. I think it does suffer from second book syndrome. There's a lot of meandering that happens in Legendborn, and I think I was a little surprised by that given how amazing Legendborn was. Like, there's there's a very clear course of action that needs to happen in Bloodmarked, and I just felt like it took a really long time for us to start trying to get there. In Bloodmarked, we also began to learn more about Bree's history, and it was all very clear in the first book, but I think the more that we began to dive into it over the course of Bloodmarked, it just became a little bit more convoluted than I think it needed to be. So Bloodmarked just, it lost me along the way. I thought coming off the high of Legendborn, this should have been a home run pretty much, and I didn't love it as much as I was anticipating. I still enjoyed it. I'm still going to be reading book 3, but I really thought I was going to come out of the second book and just be like, oh, that was phenomenal, and I did not feel like that. So that is it for me, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Again, let me know some of your surprises this year, for better or worse, books that you just thought you were gonna love and it was surprising that you didn't, or books that just completely blew you away and you had no expectations going in. I want to hear about it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.